The Cave of Darkness. Hello, God. One step. Great. Oh, and it's an ambush. Ow. Ow. You raise the Thor hammer to the sky and attack. You Golem staff. You Defender and Ancient on that guy. I would have really liked to have a Bard instead, but I need my things. And then you just attack. Chop, 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 chop. Dead. Paralyze that one to hold them off, and then Thor hammer. Ineffective. I'm pretty sure I can cast like Bolt 2. You know, just defend. Okay, I have Arrow 2. That will be helpful. Cure on you. Attack that guy, attack that guy. We're gonna step outside real quick and heal because that was dumb. Alright, take 2, Cave of Darkness. If we talk to this guy, I came from Fargabad to improve my skills. The monsters here can't be killed with normal swords. Instead, they're just split in 2. So he kind of gives you the hint, maybe I should go to Fargabad. Without necessarily spelling it out outright, but giving enough of a hint that it's reasonable to figure it out. Now this dungeon, that might actually come in handy. This dungeon is a pain in the ass. Especially with whatever nonsense this team of mine is. That said, I brought up before that I used to play this game with a walkthrough because it wasn't in English. And that particular walkthrough, when it got to this dungeon, it was basically like, once you're doing this dungeon, you need to do one of 3 things. Number 1, turn your entire team into Mystic Knights, or option number 2 is you get all your characters to level 99, or option number 3 is you get a game over because you're not gonna beat it. And that's definitely excessive. I certainly believed it when I was younger, but looking at it now, that's definitely excessive, especially because there are alternative ways to handle these guys. It's gonna be rough if you don't use Mystic Knights. That's definitely the ideal way to approach it. I'm gonna start by using your magic, because once I am capable of switching you over to a Mystic Knight, you're gonna be the last one I switch over. The first one, actually, I want it to be Gatai. Which is weird, since he can actually do stuff. Unlike Daryl, who's just completely useless at the moment. You would think Daryl would be the first one to switch over. But I want Gatai to become Mystic Knight first, because I want to actually use him as a Mystic Knight after we're finished with this place. So I want him to become the Mystic Knight first to actually start getting job levels. Because I feel like the Knight is a bit cliche. I've used the Knight through this game so many times, but I've so seldom used the Mystic Knight. I feel like the Mystic Knight is a little more interesting in that everybody uses Knights. I'm using a Knight, sure, but I feel like the Knight is just a job that everybody who plays this game just uses to death. Or at least I imagine that being the case. People I knew growing up used the Knight. I used the Knight on almost every one of my playthroughs because I just felt like it was the best of the fighter jobs. So I don't want him to be a Knight all throughout, because that just wouldn't be as interesting. So I want to switch him to a Mystic Knight from a Knight. And because of that, I want to be getting skill levels with him sooner rather than later, which is why, despite the fact that it's a less efficient choice, I want to switch him over first. Ugh, you alright? Seems I was not yet experienced enough. Please, take this. Receive Kotetsu. Ugh. I don't need a Kotetsu quite yet. The Kiku's better. So yeah, as soon as I have enough capacity, I'm gonna switch Gatai over to the Mystic Knight, and then other characters will follow. As for this dungeon, it's just a pain in the ass, not only because of these enemies, but also everything is a secret passage. So not only do you have to deal with these splitting enemies if you're not properly equipped for handling them, but you also have to deal with... You also have to deal with trying to navigate this place with all of its nonsense. Ow. Gatai's getting beat down. That's okay, Gadia can whittle people down as we go. And as we go, it occurred to me that in the ancient ruins, I had begun to bring up that I'd had some of my own ideas for if I were to see this game modded, pretty much. But I never really elaborated on those. I think either I just got on another tangent or something, I don't even remember. But I just didn't get around to talking about it, for whatever reason. So I wanted to elaborate on that while we're going through this nonsense mess of a place. And there are 3 things I would like to see changed. Very simple things, and not going nearly as over the top as some of the complete rebalance mod changes I've seen people make for this game. They just go completely overboard, if you ask me. First off, we have a paralyzer. That might come in handy. So, the first thing that... So this is basically what I would do if I made a mod for this game to recreate it in my image. Hang on, I gotta go do a thing. Sorry about that, something came up that I had to take care of. Anyway, back to what I was trying to say, so the mod idea. I like and appreciate and respect this game for what it is. I've seen so many mods that just try to completely upend the game because it's not fully customizable. You have all these jobs, but some of them are very niche and only are useful for very specific things. Not only that, but your final party will always be exactly the same, blah blah blah, because only the, super secret jobs are viable at the end. And it's like, yeah, okay, but there's nothing wrong with that, because the game's not trying to be anything but that. This game isn't trying to be a fully customizable experience. Like I said before, it's trying to be more like something like Mega Man or Ghosts and Goblins, a game where you have specific tools at your disposal, and those specific tools serve specific purposes and fill specific roles in specific situations. That's just the kind of game it's trying to be, and I feel like the game does an excellent job of being what it's trying to be. The problem is when people try to make the game out into what it's not, and that is when I feel like people judge the game unfairly or try to feel like it has to be changed or has to be rebalanced in order to be a good game when it really doesn't. You're just inserting what you want it to be rather than accepting what it is. That said, though, thinking about that sort of stuff, there were a few things that I thought of that if I were to want to see this game modded, I would like to see done. And they're much more humble changes, and changes that I feel work into the game as it is, without fundamentally changing everything. And I want to go over what those changes would be. And there's 3 of them, and we'll start with the most simple, which is to the Red Wizard. I feel like the Red Wizard should have more mid-game weapons. The biggest issue with the Red Wizard is that he doesn't have much lasting power. And that would be fine, except for another point I'm gonna get into next. Now, I'm not saying go crazy, having him being able to use, diamond swords and defenders and shit like that, because that would be excessive. That kind of stuff should be more for the knight. What I think, though, the Red Wizard should be able to utilize is utility swords, such as the Ancient Sword and the Blood Sword. Stuff that has utility outside of just dealing damage, not only because it would give the Red Mage more weapons to be able to utilize, but it would also play into the theme of the Red Mage, which is versatility, giving him a sword that can put enemies to sleep or can prolong his life by draining health. Giving the Red Wizard weapons like that plays into the Red Wizard's versatility, because the Red Wizard's thing in both this game and Final Fantasy I and any game that's had a Red Wizard has always been that versatility over being a specialized unit in any way. So I believe swords like that would complement the Red Wizard's general theme while also giving the job a little bit more lasting power. There's nothing necessarily wrong with the Red Wizard not having lasting power per se, because it's one of the first jobs. One of your starting jobs that you get right at the beginning of the game, so it's understandable that it wouldn't have much lasting power. Yeah, the White Wizard and Black Wizard have a lot of lasting power, but they even get replaced eventually. But here's the problem. The Red Wizard is the only one of the starting jobs that doesn't have a direct upgrade. If we look at those real quick, we've got the Fighter, the Monk, the White Wizard, the Black Wizard, and the Red Wizard. The Fighter and the Monk obviously upgrade directly into the Knight and the Karateka. There's also other fighters available, like the Viking as an alternative, but still they have direct continuations through the Knight and the Karateka. They even look the same. The Knight literally looks like an upgraded fighter, and the Karateka looks like an upgraded monk, and they function the same. They're fundamentally the same jobs, just stronger. And while we haven't gotten them yet, there are also upgrades to the White Wizard and the Black Wizard. It's just those jobs come near the end of the game, but they exist. There exists nothing like that for the Red Wizard. I've heard some people say that the Sage is the upgraded Red Wizard, but it's not. The Sage is not an upgraded Red Wizard. The Sage is just the ultimate magic user. It's the upgraded all magic users. It's not an upgraded Red Mage. It's not even fundamentally the same as a Red Mage because it uses staves. It can't use swords or middleweight or heavyweight armor like the Red Wizard can. So no, the Sage, it has nothing to do with the Red Wizard, aside from the fact that it can cast all types of magic, but that doesn't play into the Red Wizard either, necessarily, because the Red Wizard casts white and black magic, that's true, but the Sage can also cast summons, which the Red Wizard can't, so that's also against the Red Wizard's theme. So the Sage doesn't use the kinds of equipment as the Red Wizard, nor does it use the kinds of spells that the Red Wizard uses. It's an upgrade to all magic users, not the Red Wizard. And so because of that, no, the Sage is not the upgraded Red Wizard. The Red Wizard doesn't have a proper upgrade. That being said, I feel like the Mystic Knight should be the upgraded Red Wizard. That is the biggest change I would make, because it's a sword fighter that uses magic. And aside from this one dungeon, it really doesn't have that much utility. So I feel like doing that would give the Mystic Knight more utility, but also it would give that much needed upgrade because the game feels, it just doesn't feel, it feels like that upgrade should exist. Without an upgraded Red Wizard, it feels like something's missing. Even when I was a kid, before I even conceived the possibility of changes being made to a game, I always felt that it was weird that there's no upgraded Red Mage. That always stood out to me as peculiar. So I think the Mystic Knight should be that. Adjust his stats a little bit, So he has even intellect and spirit, because as it stands, his spirit is higher than his intellect because he learns white magic but not black magic. Other than that, though, just mostly keep his stats the same. Just balance out his intellect and spirit, and instead of just using level 1 through 3 white magic, give him level 1 through 7 white and black magic, expanding on the red wizard by having more spells. And also I got so distracted talking about this I forgot to do my job changes. But basically that's how I feel. I feel like the Mystic Knight should be the upgraded red mage. As it stands though, it's not. Hold on, I want to get my stuff equipped real quick. Alright, equip your stuff. I don't have a helmet for you yet, but demon armor, and that's it for the moment. As for stats, the Mystic Knight has higher intellect and spirit, as well as strength and agility to the knight, but lower vitality. He's more of a glass cannon, whereas the knight is more of a balanced fighter who can protect your party. And I don't think I have enough to swap anybody else over. I think both the other guys need like 24 or something. You need 32. And yeah, you go from Viking, you need 24. So that's the second change I would make. Turn the Mystic Knight into the upgraded Red Wizard, giving the Mystic Knight a little bit more utility, and also having an upgraded Red Wizard. That's the main thing, because that's something that I've always felt was missing. It always just felt so weird that the Red Wizard is the only one of the opening jobs that doesn't have an upgrade. Lastly is the Scholar. There's nothing inherently wrong with the Scholar necessarily. Again, like every other job in this game, it does what it needs to. It does what it's supposed to. And that thing it's supposed to do is give you insight into enemies if you want it or if you need it. You can learn enemy weaknesses, you can learn their hit points, and you can strategize around that information if that's just how you want to play the game. They also have their elemental books, so their weapons are inherently built around their abilities by being able to exploit revealed weaknesses by switching to weapons that deal effective damage. But here's the problem. The Scholar, despite being just a basic physical fighter at its core, aside from its analysis skills, the Scholar's best stat is its intellect. Intellect affects the power of black magic. The Scholar doesn't have black magic. So why is the Scholar's highest stat intellect when it can't use intellect for anything? Yes, I believe attack items like the North Wind have their power affected by intellect, but there is such a finite number of those items throughout the game, unless by a 1 in a million chance you happen to steal one. So, what good is the Scholar's intellect? Furthermore, there are 2 jobs in this game that are fighters with weak white magic. There is the Hunter, who is a fighter that learns level 1 to 3 white magic. Then there's the Mystic Knight, who is also a fighter that learns level 1 to 3 white magic. There is no equivalent for black magic. Why isn't the Scholar that? Especially since the Scholar's best stat is a stat it can't inherently utilize. The Scholar can't use its best stat unless you happen to have items which aren't that great anyway, even if you have high intellect, especially once you get further into the game. And you're not going to be able to freely use those items anyway because you don't have enough of them to really be taking advantage of the fact that the Scholar's best stat is its intellect. So, fundamentally, with the Scholar's stats and the fact that that's another void that's missing, another void that's in this game, I feel like the Scholar, everything else about the Scholar should be the same, but I feel like he should have low-level black magic. Maybe just levels 1 through 3. Maybe levels 1 through 4, but probably just levels 1 through 3. Would that be particularly useful? Early on in the game, yeah, I'm sure it would be. Later in the game, not particularly. Not unless you want to put enemies to sleep. You're not going to be getting much use out of black magic that's that low of a level. Nevertheless, it's not so much about that as much as it's about the fact that the scholar can't use his best characteristic. And just giving him low-level black magic, even if that low-level black magic would be ultimately useless, it's still better than nothing because it gives you a type of job that otherwise doesn't exist in the game. And it does that by playing into the natural build or the natural characteristics that the job already possesses. So that's my thoughts on how I feel like this game should be modified to stay true to itself, but also provide options that I just feel like are missing, or fill voids that just make it so it makes certain things make more sense, I guess you could say. Like that stuff, like those changes make sense to me, is what I'm trying to say. But if you have any thoughts on that subject, then you can let me know, because I would be curious about that. Where am I going? I got completely turned around because I was more focused on talking than navigating. Let's get back on track. So that's how I feel about the subject of modifying this game. Just those real simple, easy changes that I just think would make so much more sense. But if you have any thoughts, then you can let me know. I'd be kind of interested in hearing that. But I feel like most people, when they go to make changes to this game, they just go so overboard that I feel like they're completely missing the point of the game. Or they're just choosing to ignore the point and instead just completely changing the game to the point where it loses its identity. And that's also one of the reasons why I prefer to keep things simple. I prefer to just play a game in its original form. I'll use patches to fix bugs, but I'm not a fan of just completely changing it because, as I think I've said before, if I care so much about, if I have so many problems with the game that I need to see it completely changed, then why am I playing that game instead of playing something else? It doesn't make sense to me. That's the thing that makes the least sense to me about people going so out of the way sometimes to mod games. Because it's like, if you feel like you have to do that, then why are you even playing that game? Find a different game to play that better suits what you want. Because if you need to see this game modified so severely, then clearly this game isn't it. And I can't see modding as anything other than that. No matter how somebody might rationalize it to me, it doesn't make any sense to me outside of that, because that's all I see it as. Because if you like a game, then you don't need to modify it, because you like what's there. And if you don't like a game, then why are you playing that game? Why aren't you playing something else? I don't get it. Let's just keep using your magic. I want to save my potions as well as Gaudia's magic for once Azure has switched over to a Mystic Knight himself. Which we're getting kind of close, I think. We need 32 as we go in deeper. What's down this way? Nothing. Fortunately, despite all the secret passages, this dungeon is decently straightforward, actually. Because yes, there's a lot of secret passages, but most of them you can see in the wall. They have the little dark spots so you can see where the passages are. And it's not like you're trying to wander through a maze of secret passages when you go through a secret passage. When you go through a secret passage, you just keep going straight. You don't ever have to do any weird turns in the middle of the passage. You just go straight until you hit a wall. And then once you hit that wall, you turn. And if you can't turn one way, you turn a different way. There'll only be one way you can turn, and then again, you just keep walking straight until you hit another wall. So yes, you can't see where the path is leading you in advance, but it's also not particularly confusing, because there's not a bunch of branching paths within those invisible paths. So I really don't think it's too bad. It can be obnoxious, sure, but I feel like it's a manageable kind of obnoxious, you could say. So that was all just dead ends. And I know that because I ran into walls. I don't need to go back in those and start bumping my head into everything. Because, again, that's just not how this dungeon works. I want you to confuse that guy. Gadia and Gatai should be able to manage those Vasagos just fine. Ugh. The biggest difficulty with this dungeon isn't the navigating though, it's just a battle of attrition trying to get through it. Because it's really long, these enemies hit hard, especially because Mystic Knights don't have the best armor available to them. And it's there, and you don't have as many options as you might a general dungeon as far as getting through it. Or whatever. We're hitting the rambling stage because I discussed everything I wanted to, or at least had in mind going into it. Like 1 or 2 more battles. I was hoping I would get the capacity quicker than this, honestly. I'm gonna put you in the back row for a second. This way. There we go. See, it's not so bad. Just keep checking all the paths until you find the one that goes somewhere. Hello. I put Gatai in the back row so he would be safe. Not so he would be moved to the front row because of a surprise attack. Confuse them. Ow. You can do it, Azure! Protect us! Damn it! Fight! Move! You just defend for the moment. Ow. Great, you defended at the end of the turn, which is completely useless. Because even if you had been attacked, the defend wouldn't have gone off to protect you. Defend should always go first. And in a normal game, it does, but in this, it's still determined by the turn order. Azure skill up, Gadia skill up. Yay, Azure became better as a white mage. Goody. I need 1 capacity. And I wanted to save my Cure 4s until I've gotten my job change. Is there anything this way, though? There is! Jeez, so many. Ugh. Just gotta win this one last battle. You can do it, guys. Ugh. Good job being in the back row. Confuse! Okay. That'll help significantly. Attack that. Arrow 2. You just keep defending. Attack. That's 1 down. Good, you attacked the one that wasn't confused anymore. Arrow 2! Whoosh! Too bad, despite the fact that you can fight them with magic without them splitting. They have really high magic defense, so spells will only get you so far. Okay, we did it. Now you... I have enough, right? Yes, and yes, I want to do it from White Mage. Or White Wizard, whatever. Alright, but first... everybody gets a full heal with Cure 4. Demon Shield, Demon Armor. I need a weapon. Gatai! Hand over your thing, and you also take a shield. Azure! Ashura! Okay, here is our party for now. Let us march onward. To nothing, and I think this just... yeah, that just connects to those as well. Alright, so that was just a bunch of nothing. So yeah, it can be annoying because stuff like that can happen, But it's not complicated in the sense that you'll get lost in invisible mazes. Because once you're in because once you're in the secret passage, you just go straight until you hit a wall. Then you see which way you can turn. Good job, Gatai, you dodged. Or blocked, one of the two. Ugh. Maybe even a combination. A parry is sort of a block and dodge at the same time. So maybe that's what happened. Skill up! You know what? Hang on, I'm going to... You don't need to have 2 of the strong weapons. Let's spread out my damage a little bit more, give one of the shield guys a bit higher damage, and then you'll be just fine with an Ashura. And now you can use some of your magic. Some of your crappy magic. Cure! That sucked. Cure 2, that was better. Cure 2. Cure. Cure. Okay. Continue the march! Every time we see a path, we just check it. See where it leads. Please stop ambushing me, ow. Ugh. At least the Haniels aren't nearly as tough as they just crit me. Everybody, attack the Balfrey except for Gaudia to destroy one of the other guys. Totally destroyed. But then his brother was angry, as was that guy. They just beat the shit out of Gatai. Alright, men, finish it! Converge with our blades and slice it apart. Slashy, slashy. Good job, Gatai. Azure, you did it. I think this is the very first time Azure's been a job class that belongs in the front row. Even when we were at Goldor's mansion, and they're like, you cannot use magic on this guy. He was, I think, a hunter. Hello, Treji. You are far more important than progress. Thank you for not being another freaking ambush. Daryl, Azure, Gatai, gang up on the Deathclaw while Gaudia wrecks that Haniel by himself. Same plan! Because 3 of you couldn't do it. The Deathclaws are the tough ones to take out. They have higher defense, and I think also higher hit points than any of the other guys here. Skill up! A Kiku. Who wants that? You have a Kotetsu. Azure, take the Kiku. There we go. And you have a Kotetsu, okay. Same strat as last time. Daryl, Azure, Gatai team up on the Deathclaw while Gaudia starts whittling down their back row units. Oh, he failed! The plan went backwards! Okay, you all go after the weakened one. Whichever you gets it off first does it. Gatai took the initiative to finish off the enemy, and then got smacked in the face for it. But then Daryl comes in with the assist, and then Gaudia whoosh 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 to finish him off with a mighty crit that lobbed off its eye and both mouths in one whirling dervish of death. Let's do some healing, and then advance! And go through this nonsense. Another ambush, ow. Don't attack Gaudia anymore. Attack my people with shields. Not that makes the most difference, but attack my people with shields. No, Gaudia failed again, ow. Really need to get rid of the Balfrey at least. I'm gonna make sure real quick that I remembered to bring my Phoenix Downs. Yes, okay, good. Cure 2, Cure 2. We're out of Cure 2s. And now the high potions. That will hopefully carry us through the rest of this. Ah, 3 more paths. Hello. Dodge! Dodge not! I also thought about stocking up on normal potions before coming in here, just to have more healing, because this dungeon is so long. More skill ups, some of which won't be as useful as others. But Gatai has a future as a Mystic Knight because I feel like having a Mystic Knight instead of just a Knight. I just couldn't do it until now because the game takes forever to give you Mystic Knight gear. That's nothing. That's something. And I think the top one is also just a dead end to fake you out, basically. To be like, oh, this is the most direct path to the guy, or to the path that you see, so that's obviously the right one, but then I think you just hit a wall. The game tricks you there. Subverts your expectations. Let's keep going. More stuff. Hello, new enemies. Strike first! Don't let the new enemies do anything! The Hell Horses are weird. First off, with their design, just the idea of a 6-legged horse is strange. I questioned how it would even be able to comfortably gallop like that. Just like physically, how would that work? But also, unlike every other splitting enemy, they actually give experience points. Got you a skill up. And it's weird. Another problem with this dungeon is you can't run from these battles. I'm pretty sure every duplicating enemy is impossible to escape. So you have to fight these battles. Even if you have a thief in your party, you just cannot run away. So there's no choice. Each of these fights, you have to see them through. Just another thing on top of everything else. So this is definitely a tough place, but I mean, we're kind of getting near the end. So, the game needs to be getting harder somehow, and this is one of the ways it does it, is by throwing you in this place. Which is fine. I don't think it's necessarily a bad dungeon. I may have said this before, but I like how, I like the variety in this game. Yes, you can go to something like Final Fantasy 1 or much better, something like Final Fantasy 5 or Final Fantasy Tactics, and you have so much customization and free reign with your party, and any jobs can work. You can make any combination of jobs work pretty much. Some will be more efficient in certain situations than others, but you can always tweak your strategy a little bit to overcome the challenges set before you, or if you're really stuck, you can just grind a bit to compensate. But this game is very much more built around the idea that you need to play by the game's rules, otherwise you're going to struggle. And I don't mind that, honestly. One reason I don't mind that is because, yes, some people might find that annoying and restrictive, but when I look at that, I see it as gameplay variety. Like any other. You play something like Super Mario Brothers, and you get to an ice world. Suddenly you have to play differently by compensating for the ice physics, or you're playing something similar and you get to a point where the game essentially changes, and you have to compensate for it. Ninja Gaiden 2 is a great example of that because that game has a lot of really gimmicky stages. There's a stage with wind, there's a stage with ice, there's a stage that's completely dark, and you have to figure out how to come up with solutions for that. There's something like, I keep bringing up Mega Man, but again, I feel like this game is very much like Mega Man. You have something like Mega Man where there's all sorts of different challenges and scenarios, and you have to utilize your weapons in different ways to overcome those. And that's how the game achieves variety, by giving you different types of challenges instead of just throwing the same kinds of stuff at you over and over again, but just making the enemies stronger. And this game achieves variety by having stuff like this. Not only giving you different types of dungeons and combat scenarios to overcome, but also requiring you to think differently. If you could just stay the same jobs throughout the entire game, your solutions to the game's problems wouldn't change. I would still be going through this dungeon with having my bard confuse enemies, having my knight put them to sleep, and then having my archer offering support fire and the geomancer using terrain. I would be doing the exact same stuff in these battles as you saw in the Temple of Time and as you saw in the Undersea Cave. The solutions wouldn't be changing, but by having dungeons like this or bosses like this with very specific mechanics that require you, or at least highly encourage you, to use different job combinations, you're not only required to adapt to the game's challenges as far as figuring out how to succeed against overwhelming odds, but you're also forced to adapt how you play. And so you get more gameplay variety, not only from the enemies that you're facing and the dungeon layouts, but you're also getting gameplay variety in your solutions to those problems. I feel like the only time it becomes an issue is if you're playing the game over and over again. Like if you play through this game 10, 20 times, then yes, it can get a little tired having the same solutions for everything. Every single time doing this dungeon with all Mystic Knights, every single time doing the mini parts where you're just having to use magic and become wizards. But as it stands, I feel like it works. Again, because you have more types of a variety, so to speak. The variety is coming from more than just the monsters, more than just the dungeons like you would see in most RPGs. You're also getting gameplay variety by having to adapt and utilize your tools differently, or use completely different tools entirely, rather than just solving everything by doing the exact same stuff. And the only thing that's changing is the enemies and the dungeons. But your tactics aren't changing at all. But this requires you to change tactics and change how you play the game. And I feel like that's what they were going for. They weren't going for a fully customizable experience. They were going for an experience where the game achieves variety by more ways than most RPGs do it. It achieves more types of variety through its utilization of the job system, while also keeping things very simple. Yes, other games will have more variety in the sense that there's more stuff you can do with your jobs, so you have more variety with the customization of your tactics, but even then, how much are you really changing when, yes, you have more customization, so you have variety through your customization, but you're still not changing how you're playing the game. Yes, you're customizing to have the tactics you want, but then it winds up boiling down to you abusing those tactics and not changing those tactics because you've built to those specific tactics. Like with Final Fantasy V, I love the job system in that game. There's so much you can do with it. But I feel like whenever I'm playing Final Fantasy V, my solutions to battles at the end of the game are pretty much exactly the same as they were at the halfway point. Because by about the halfway point, I've pretty much got to my final jobs. Yes, I'm developing those jobs and maybe getting some new skills, but I still pretty much have my final jobs and nothing's really changing aside from maybe getting new spells to do certain things more efficiently. But the core element of my tactics is still staying exactly the same, save for maybe occasional battles that require me to mix things up, because maybe enemies have certain vulnerabilities or immunities or whatever. But this game doesn't allow you to do that. And if you try that, you're just making it harder on yourself. And some people would rather play by their own rules rather than play by the game's rules, and that's perfectly fine. But I would rather, I don't know, I like Final Fantasy V more than this game. I'm not gonna pretend I don't. But I do feel like the way that this game does its job system has merit in its own right. It's just once you accept what it's trying to do. And I feel like I've gone on about this multiple times, but I feel like the reason I've gone on about that multiple times is because that's such a common contention towards this game, or a disliking towards this game, or just a misunderstanding towards this game. And being in this dungeon that's such an epitome of that makes me think about it, which is why I'm rambling on about it, despite the fact that I'm pretty sure I've already basically brought it up before. But this is such a fine example of that. And is this particularly interesting, just whacking things with the sword? Not necessarily, but there's also other ways it could be approached. It's just you can't really use your Viking or your Karateka or your Knight unless you have the ancient sword and know how that can be abused against these guys. You're going to be needing more magic or relying on the Mystic Knights. So you're changing things up just enough to where you're not always relying on the exact same stuff. So you're getting variety in more ways than one, whereas a lot of other RPGs only achieve variety in one way, which is the enemies and the dungeons. But this game just requires you to change things up in a slightly different way to keep things feeling fresh and to keep each challenge feeling like something that stands out as its own special thing. I think that's progress. Yeah, this is just dead end. These Chronos guys. I know they're supposed to be snake men, but I've always kind of felt like, with how their sprite looks, I've always kind of felt like it looks almost as if their fangs are their eyes, and they're just wearing a snake hat. And they're just like Berserker Man, wearing the pelt of some lizard monster. Especially when you look at things like the Mystic Knight and the Black Wizard that have that exact same aesthetic of just a completely black face under a hat or a helmet with the yellow eyes. And since there are job classes with that exact same aesthetic, I feel like that's kind of how those Chronos enemies look. I know that's not the case. I know they're just snake men and those are their fangs. But I feel like they could be interpreted as humans wearing the pelt or the scales of some lizard monster, like a dragon or something. And the fangs are their eyes. Oh boy, this dungeon's still going. And this isn't even the longest dungeon. It's the second longest, but who wants the Genji armor? You know what? Gaudia really needs a defense upgrade. Yeah, this isn't even the longest dungeon in the game. It's probably the second longest, but the final dungeon is significantly longer than this one. The final dungeon is just absurd in every sense of the word. We're making it though. Slowly but surely, we're making it through this. And hopefully won't die, and hopefully we won't die and have to do it all over again. That's the main hope. Going through a place like this, the main concern is just succeeding and then not having to lose all the progress, because there's no saving in dungeons in this game. They didn't implement anything like that. which is fine for most of the journey, because a lot of the dungeons in Final Fantasy III aren't too bad with their length. Some of them only take like 10, 20 minutes, maybe a half hour, maybe an hour, but that's also, like some of the dungeons I think took me about an hour, but that's also because I wasn't using the exit spell to leave. This one though just keeps going, and it just wears you down. But we must keep pressing onward. We need to get the Earth Fang. There's a path here. Hello? I almost prefer the back attack over the standard ambush, because at least with the back attack, I'm not getting the crap beat out of me myself. And I can still overwhelm them with my attacks gradually, even from the back row. It almost makes you think I should just be in the back row. But then these battles would take forever, and we don't want them taking more forever than they already are. Slaughter the horses! They're a bigger threat than the Chronos, because they can do stuff we haven't seen them do. I think they can cast magic. They're just not doing it. Daryl, skill up! There it is! The Earth Fang! We can sense its presence just beyond this wall. We're about to gain another level in this place. But the Mystic Knight's vitality kinda sucks. It's all those horses' fault. Now let's just keep going. We don't really have the capacity quite yet to be concerning ourselves with that anyway. Focus on the Vasagos, they have less hit points than the Chronos. Let Gaudia deal with the guys that are tough. Almost. Just a little bit more. He's on his last leg. Finish him! Keep the pressure on! We have a high potion. That's a good thing to get. Quick, chug that high potion. Chug a second one for good measure. And then wade through the water. Good. I'm glad that's there. Oh no, an ambush! It was a trick! We entered that tiny little passage, and then as we entered, these guys came out from wherever they were hiding, knowing that we had just walked into a trap. And then as we stepped back out into this hall, they struck! While our guard was down, and we were too preoccupied wondering what the hell was the point of that tunnel. And then suddenly, krah, and we were like, ah! Like that. Azure was like, ah! Hello? Level up. Level up. Level up. I can't even level up with not only does the Mystic Knight's vitality be kind of meh, but I can't even level up with my Protect Ring or my Defender Swords because he can't use any of that stuff. Oh, here we are. We have made it. Oh, a battle! An ambush from the water. Oh, damn it, it was an ambush. I didn't want it to actually be an ambush. We were crossing the bridge. Our guard was down. We were so weary from this long trek that we were just glad to see it, the end in sight. So as we were walking across this bridge, suddenly these creatures lunged from the water and struck at us while we were just being so hopeful for the end that we weren't paying attention. But then we retaliated and sent them back into the water. Chunks of flesh splashing into the pond or pool, and then it just turns red as we take a break. and then advance. It's the Earth Fang. Who dares break this seal which has lasted so long? Oh no, a guy! Of course, they have to end this pain in the ass dungeon with a boss. Do I have extra swords that I can... Yes. What the... What? Wait. Oh, that's the Earth Fang. I don't think I've ever seen that before. The game doesn't know yet that it's the Earth Fang, so it has this weird placeholder question mark item. Okay. That's really weird. You have the Genji shield, so you keep that. Quick, Azure! Switch to a second Ashura so we can get some more damage. Gadia, use the god's wine on yourself. Let's just beat the crap out of this guy before he has a chance to do that again. Fight for a second, quick! Switch to shield. Protect yourself. And then step back. And then... Azure, you pass your shield to Daryl. You're like, here, take this! And then Daryl steps forth. Azure steps back to protect himself. He's like, ugh, he took that blow and he's like, I'm too wounded to keep going. Take my sword. I have to step back. And then Gadia gets in the way. He was going for the finishing blow to Azure, but Gadia intercepted and then... And then Daryl went and chopped him up some more. Azure went to safety. Ugh. Now, we have to protect Gadia. Everybody, where are my potions? Wait. Before that. Shield up. Shield. Shield up. Arm yourself with 2 shields. And then, high potion. Him. Azure. I'd like you to high potion yourself, but Gadia is more important right now. Everybody, high potion Gadia. He's our guy who has the haste effect, so we need him to stay alive more than anything. And then Gadia, get in there with the chops. Azure, oh, just barely hangs on. Daryl, save Azure. Azure, save yourself as well. Gadia, Katai, get in there. Oh, good dodge. Azure deflected that. He raised his shield and deflected the sword strike with the last of his strength. Okay, things are stabilized a bit. Stop with this double shield crap. Get in there. Azure, switch to double shields and heal yourself again. This battle is weird. High potion. Gatai, Gadia, get in there with the chops. High potion! Alright, Azure is stable. Gadia takes another big hit. Gatai chops him up and finishes him! Oh, that was quite the boss. Money, capacity, experience, Daryl skill up, Gatai skill up. Obtain the Earth Fang. Alright! Oh no, that's us. For some reason I thought that was Dorga telepathically telling us to go back to his house. Alright, now, back to Dorga's house. Doga and Un are waiting. And now to walk out. After I fix my equipment. My equipment is kind of nonsense at the moment. Azure, you need a sword. Kiku. Remove the Ashura. I could have had better swords equipped. Oh well. Kotetsu. You have Kotetsu. You have Kiku and Ashura. Kiku Ashura. Let's have you dual wielding as well. And Azure can switch to the Genji shield. Now for the walk out of this place. Because I'm walking out. I don't even think I have any exit spells left. I don't, because and I don't have a thing to escape. But that's fine, because I am not that kind of weak man. I walk out, so I can reap the benefits of walking out. Oh no! The benefits of walking out have just punched me in the face! The horse kicks Gadia in the face with its hooves as Gatai takes a sword slash right across the chest. Ah! I'm reaping the benefits of walking out so hard! Please stop hitting the guy who's already injured! Ow. And in case anybody was wondering why I wasn't attempting to use the Thor hammer at all with Azure when he was a white wizard, I kept either just casting basic cure spells using Arrow or using the Golem staff, which wasn't being really useful at all, just to keep him from doing basic attacks. And it would have made sense maybe to be using the Thor hammer with him, since I believe that casts Bolt 2 and assuming that worked, I'm sure it would have done more damage than the 3 damage I was getting out of the Golem staff. But unlike some other Final Fantasy games, in this one, you can't use weapons in battle for their magic effects unless you can equip them. So that's why we never saw Azure using the Thor hammer to zap things. I just decided to keep the Thor hammer because I thought maybe it would be useful on Daryl while he's a useless Viking. But then I used it once, it failed, and then it kind of occurred to me that these guys have such high magic resistance that an item like that being used by a Viking probably isn't going to be very effective anyway. So I just decided to have him defend and maybe tank some hits if he got attacked, to reduce the amount of healing I would have to do. Especially since even if the Thor hammer did work, I don't imagine the damage. I don't imagine the clock for the battles would have really been sped up at all by that pittance of damage. Although I think I did kill an enemy earlier in this dungeon with an attack that only dealt 51 damage, so maybe it would have made a difference once or twice by pure happenstance. Also, once we're out of this place, I don't think we'll be seeing the Mystic Knight's attacks doing so much damage, because in addition to preventing these enemies from splitting, I believe all the monsters in this place actually are just straight up weak against the element of all the Dark Knight swords, because I think all the Dark Knight swords deal dark elemental damage, or Mystic Knight as they are in this version of the game. Later versions would turn these guys into Dark Knights, which are more of a recurring job class throughout the series, whereas Mystic Knights are exclusive to this game. But they still have dark swords, just in the lore, that's what they are. And I believe their swords actually do deal dark elemental damage, which I think all the monsters in this dungeon are weak against, which is why we're seeing such high numbers. I don't think we'll be seeing quite as high of numbers from our attacks with Gatai as a Mystic Knight once we get out of this place. I don't believe anyway. Still high numbers, especially because since the Mystic Knight is more of a glass cannon, I'm probably going to have him dual wielding more than using a shield like I had him as a knight. Part of the reason I had him using a shield as a knight was because of the knight's cover ability. So if he did need to protect anybody at some point, he would be able to more efficiently do so. And I wanted that option to be there. But because the Mystic Knight can't do that, I'm probably going to have him more just dual-wielding swords just to wreck stuff. While my other 3 guys just go back to Bard, Hunter, and Geomancer and just continue doing what they've been doing recently. And yeah, I probably could have gotten through this a little bit easier by just having everybody dual-wielding swords and not worry about shields. But when equipping the characters back in town, shields are just cheaper than swords, and I didn't want to spend, and so I basically chose sword or shield to buy shields instead of just a ton of swords to save money. Especially since a lot of this stuff is just going to wind up being sold after I'm done in this dungeon anyway. So I wanted to save a bit of money in that regard, especially because I felt like I would be able to get through it just fine with shields. And it turned out shields were maybe helpful against the boss. I was glad I had shields as options for the boss fight, so I could set myself up for better healing with items while keeping myself protected. That actually reminds me of a completely unrelated... I need to write that down. Hang on. I need to write that down because that could be a talking point in a future dungeon, just so I have something to talk about. Okay, I wrote it down. I wanted to take a quick note because using the shields to protect me while I healed reminded me of something else that can make a talking point for a future dungeon. So stay tuned for that if you're curious about what it is, because I don't want to talk about it right now. We're practically done with this place, so it would be a waste, and I don't want to drag out this dungeon more by talking more during it. We're just trying to get out of here at this point. So I'd rather just focus on that than dragging it out any longer than it needs to by rambling on. As I instead ramble on about not wanting to ramble on, that reminds me of something else. I'm gonna write that down. That's not a topic that second thing I thought of, I'm not sure if it's a topic I'll actually come back to, but I wanted to write it down anyway, just in case. Because I can always use stuff just to talk about and ramble while trying to get through these dungeons. Especially since it gives me something to talk about than just reacting and being like, ugh, as a guy gets hit or something. Because I'm not too into just reactionary stuff. I'd rather be actually talking about something than just commentating on what's going on screen. Because you can already see what's going on screen. You don't need me to be telling you what you can already see. So I feel like that kind of discussion doesn't really add anything interesting. I'd rather discuss stuff that's an actual discussion rather than just telling you what your eyes are already telling you by just looking at the screen and being like, yeah, that stuff's happening. Unless it's an interesting fight, like a boss. Then reactionary stuff is a bit more worthwhile. But in these fights, there's just nothing really to say about them most of the time. Unless things go horribly wrong. But there hasn't been too much of that so far. Oops. No, my note! It fell on the floor. Don't go away, note. I don't want to lose you. You're important right now. Even though it's just a scrap of garbage, I literally just wrote the note on the back of a receipt. I like doing that. I like using receipts, particularly ones that just have a blank back. I don't like receipts that have coupons and crap and advertisements on the back because they can't use them. I like keeping my receipts and then using them to write down notes instead of wasting entire sheets of paper to write down notes, especially very temporary notes that I might only need for a few days or even just that day. Like maybe I just need to maybe I need to write something down that I thought of at night and I need to be reminded of it in the morning. So I'll write it down on the back of a receipt, just a real quick reminder, and then put that receipt on my nightstand or something. So then when I wake up in the morning, I'll see the receipt with the note on it and be like, oh yeah, I had to do that thing, or something to that effect. And I'll just set the receipt aside just until I get around to doing the thing, just so I don't forget in the meantime, and then once I've done the thing, I'll just throw the receipt away. And that's what I've done here. I've just taken a couple notes on the back of a receipt that I had sitting in a junk drawer, basically sitting in there waiting for that moment to be utilized for notes. Ah, freedom! We made it. Yay, we have so much money and capacity now. And that's one reason to walk out. Sure, you don't get crap for experience in that place, but you get so many capacity points. And because you're gaining so little experience, you're getting all this capacity without leveling up at the same time. So now, we have 227 capacity points that we can start utilizing as we progress to get all the more hit points by being able to much more freely swap our jobs around. Let's save on file 1 now. We can safely save on file 1. I didn't want to overwrite file 1 just in case stuff I did with my capacity points ended up screwing me in any way. But there we are. We have acquired the Earth Fang. And now our next story destination is Dorga's house. But I think there's something else I want to attempt first. So I'll probably do that unless I change my mind by the time I continue.